So a few weeks before recording this episode, I listened to an interview on Diary of a CEO with Galong Tubten, who's a Buddhist monk who went on, this very prestigious Diary of a CEO businessy kind of show to talk about this long con, essentially, that has been happening in our society for so long, where marketers, corporations, people in power, pretty much everything in our current society has been based around making us all feel like we are not enough and constantly need something outside of ourselves to regulate, to feel better, which is how in our society we get sold to so often, because so much of selling and hyper-consumerism these days is making us feel like we're not okay without this thing. We have a deficit, a problem, and we need something to fill it. And as we all know, that never, ever works. No matter how many orders we place and Amazon Prime packages we get at our doorstep, it never ends up filling the hole. And what I didn't realize is that although I identified so deeply with his statement, I didn't realize that this connected to another topic that I'm so extremely passionate about and have talked about a zillion times on this show, which is codependency. I thought that codependency only existed inside of relationships, maybe romantic relationships predominantly, sometimes friendships. As I've examined my life the last few years, I've definitely connected codependency or like my own need to look for something outside of myself to addictions that I've struggled with, whether it's food or cannabis. But I didn't realize that codependency stems into this sort of relational nature of our society. And it goes so deep and specifically not only harms everybody, but harms women historically. And when I had Vanessa Bennett come on the show for this episode, she put language to all of these missing pieces in my whole codependency theory. And she explained why, especially us women, are so prone to constantly feeling shame and are always looking for ways to stay safe outside of ourselves, because we especially are taught that we are not enough and need status or beauty or the relationship or this or that to be picked and stay safe. It was extremely refreshing and a little bit, I guess, taboo or outside of the box to have this conversation with Vanessa, because we definitely went places I've never gone on this pod before. And she has what maybe some people would consider a pretty radical view, but one that really resonated in my body and made a lot of sense as to the very real oppression that I know the women in my family have suffered for generations upon generations of not having choice and feeling like they don't have agency. And that is sort of to uphold these structures in our society that benefit from people and women not having choice. So this is a very fascinating episode. It's not your usual, like, you're codependent with your boyfriend episode. It's more of a, let's take a really hard look at what are the unspoken things in our society that are contributing to mass levels of pain and inequality and are no longer working. And it's a very empowering episode for women and came at a really important time in my life. So I hope that it also resonates with you guys. I think that as a woman, recognizing that you have these codependent relationship tendencies can often be a doorway into examining these deeper ways in which you're conditioned by your family systems, by society, by all these places to be disempowered and in this place of constant lack. And right now in my life, I know my current goal and current journey is to really be rid of that and find out what my voice is and what my needs are and what my path is, separate from performing or staying safe or doing the things that I always thought would keep me in a role that protected me. So I hope this comes at the right time for you. And Vanessa's just absolutely amazing. There are so many nuggets of wisdom in this episode. I need to listen to it like 3 more times. And I feel like she is a really important guest for where I hope this show can go as we continue to have these more frank and real conversations. So let me know what you think, and let me know if you have any questions or follow-ups for a part 2 with Vanessa, because I'd love to have her back on in the future. Let's talk real life, right? I think the best way to move through life is to always be the student and to always be curious. Life will show you either way. It's just how you choose to listen. You can always count on you. You will always have your own back. This is not the last thing you'll create. Play is the process. Sometimes it has to be dramatic. That's the funny part. When your back's up against the wall, you will prevail. You're allowed to grow and change. You are allowed to birth something new. I hope you make your art.
But I have to prove my value through how busy I am.
Which is a great way to segue into this conversation. I feel like we should actually keep that in as the first sentence. I have to prove my value with how busy I am. Because I had no idea that sentence right there was connected to my very own codependency. So welcome to the show. It's such an honor to have you on. And I'm really excited to talk about your work on relational health, codependency, motherhood, and the like.
All the things.
So can you just quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work?
Yeah. So my name is Vanessa Bennett. I'm a licensed depth psychotherapist, which I usually slow down and say, like, enunciate, because most people hear death psychologist. So depth psychotherapy. So I'm based in Jungian psychology. So a lot of my work is around the unconscious and shadow work and really working with the language the unconscious speaks, which is through image and metaphor, not the way that the conscious speaks, which is actually through language and structure, right? So so much of my work is through that lens. It's through more of a spiritual psychology lens. And so I work with couples, women, men. I do retreats. I have a podcast. I write books, all that jazz. But, and I come from the New York corporate world, so it's been like an interesting journey to get here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I started listening to your work recently, once we scheduled our episode and I was doing my deep dive, I was so elated to hear you talk about a codependency period, because I think that it's one of the most important conversations that we can have.
Agreed.
And in fact, it is so related to so many other sort of epidemics that we're witnessing, from addiction of substance to addiction to phones and shopping and all of these things that we think are issues that exist in silos but are actually related to our own relational patterns.
Totally.
And our own codependency, which comes from maybe feeling this lack within. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about codependency on this show before, and I'd love to just start with you explaining your take on what is codependency.
Yeah. So for a long time, I've kind of made it this like pithy sentence for people to just really hold on to and understand, which I usually say codependency is really just simply, if you're good, I'm good. If you're not good, I'm not good. So essentially, my feeling of being safe in my body, my feeling of being okay, my feeling of being enough is based outside of myself, right? So I have to outsource that to another person or to shopping, to buying stuff, right? And really, relationships are, outside of maybe shopping in our culture, the only socially sanctioned addiction that we have. I always say, like, one person's people pleasing is another person's Jack and Coke. They all serve the same purpose. It's just that relationships have been made to feel like it's okay to use other people in that way to self-soothe or to regulate, because that's what's taught to us as a society. So one of the ways that I talk about codependency that's a little bit different than many is I talk about it that we are a codependent society, right? Like, we've been taught that that's what love and relationships look like, period, through media, through culture, passed down generations. And that, I think, is a little bit different than the way that it used to be spoken about back when codependency first became a word, right, in like the 80s, which used to really talk about just like the wives of alcoholic husbands. And it's obviously gotten a lot broader since then.
Can you explain what that means in a societal context and how that shows up in societal attitudes or undercurrents?
Yeah. So really, if we look at the systems of dominance, the systems of oppression that we live in, right? So we could talk about any of them. They all would kind of translate to what I'm saying. So whether we're talking about capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, right, colonialism, any of these, all of those systems require the people that live in them to operate from a place of shame, a place of lack, right? Because if I'm operating from a place of shame and lack, I'm going to be looking outside of myself constantly to make myself feel okay. So I'm going to prop up systems like capitalism by continuing to buy crap I don't need to make myself feel okay. Or I'm going to continue to, look to somebody else and think to myself, oh, I'm above them, I'm better than them in order to make myself feel okay, right?
Because I have XYZ that I've purchased, or because I have success, or because I have this relationship,
or this color skin, right? Yep. Or anything. Yep. So all of these systems that teach us that there's a one up, one down system have to operate from our place of lack.
Yes.
Because if we felt like we were enough internally, we wouldn't actually need to operate in a system of one up, one down.
How early do you think we're told that we're not enough, and how?
I mean, that's a good question. I think for a lot of us, it's not necessarily so overt, right? A lot of times it's more covert. But the way I talk about the like codependency, like you asked me, in more of a societal structure, it's really the way that we're taught that because we don't have inherent value, because we don't know our sense of worth, we have to look outside of ourselves to make ourselves feel okay. And so a lot of us do that by looking at other humans, other relationships, right? So whether we're talking about romantic relationships, our relationships with our kids, our friends, our family, it really doesn't actually matter. What that looks like is a transactional agreement, which is we do this really early with our kids. So when you ask, where does this start? Or, when are we taught this? A lot of it's unconscious. I'm not saying that it comes from a malicious place, right? But we're taught really early on, you will get more love if you act a certain way. You will get more praise if you perform a certain amount, if you make me look good in a certain way, if you, check these boxes. So it's not about who we are as a human being. It's about the way that we're able to perform to make our parents feel that's how we're able to get our love, right? And so it starts really early. And it's not to blame our parents. Again, most of this is the way that they were taught, the way their parents were taught. We see it with our teaching system. We see it with coaches. We see it's everywhere. It's insidious. So we're basically all walking around tap dancing for our belonging because we didn't learn really early on to source it from within and have this kind of deep knowing of like, I am enough just as I am.
Yeah. Often on this show, when I've talked about my own experience of codependency and how I've realized that it comes up for me in relationships, I realize that I'm unconsciously trying to get that need or that lack met through the person in unknowingly serving a purpose for me, which turns out to be something that's very selfish
That's
and
the transaction.
Out of alignment with what I feel are my values. And yet it's so second nature to so many of us. And as I've done this soul searching, the only answer that I've come to is, in order for me to just not do that to other people anymore, I have to make sure that I have a relationship with myself and that I trust myself. And yet, as I've started to do that, I realize how difficult it is to just begin to even trust the signals that my own body is giving me. And I notice that when I listen to what my body is telling me, oftentimes it's kind of telling me that I need to tear my whole life down in a sense, because it's all been built around what you're saying, around getting this external validation and getting these needs met externally. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions I could ask from that big statement, but I guess number one would be, have you come to the same conclusion that building self-relationship and self-trust is step one of the answer to this?
I mean, it's step one, and it's not just step one, like you do it and then you move on. It's the step that you continue to come back to forever and ever. So it's more of like the through line to all codependency recovery. Because ultimately, again, like we were talking about these systems of dominance, they can't actually function on top of the shoulders of people who are based in a solid sense of self, right? So the thing about even like, for example, the book that I wrote, Through the Lens of Motherhood, it's like, if we all collectively stood up and looked around ourselves and said, oh, this is bullshit, actually. Yeah. It's not that there's something wrong with me. I'm actually functioning normally in a messed up system, right? What I have found happens for myself personally, but also the people that I've worked with, is that it takes a lot of the shame and personalization out of it so that I'm able to go, oh, it's actually not about, there's nothing wrong with me, right? Of course, there's things that I can do and I can improve and I can work on, but it's actually the system. And so it gives me more like, I don't know, like gumption to do the work when it's like, oh, I'm not inherently flawed. It's what I was taught. Cool. So now when I work with clients, and I've been kind of jokingly called like the cold water in the face therapist, where like I lead codependency groups and I'm like, listen, I'm going to say it like it is. Codependency is inherently very manipulative.
Yes.
And people are like, oh, and I'm like, but you can handle hearing that. We've got to be able to hear these hard truths about ourselves if we're going to actually fix it, change it, improve on it, right? But I think part of it is also knowing it's not because there's something inherently wrong with you. So that's my kind of workaround to get there, is like, you've got to be able to hold these different ideas or realities in order to say, okay, I can hear that about myself. It's not going to shut me down, but I can say, what do I do about it? How do I change it?
I think you're so spot on with what you're saying about that value judgment of self. Once you realize all these things, it can be so debilitating and kind of frees you, because I think once I started to dive into this, my first thing was like, oh, I'm selfish because I'm being selfish. And I can acknowledge that when I'm doing these things to get these relational needs met because I don't feel safe in my own personhood, I'm being selfish, so I must be a selfish person, and there must be something that's so wrong with me. But now I'm realizing that like we are all just reflections of this very, I wouldn't even say selfish society, but this selfish, unwritten selfish contract of how society and business is so often done. And I really can't separate it from capitalism, because even in my own business and my own experience of running my business and starting to learn the rules of marketing, you see how much better marketing does when someone is made to think that they have a problem or that something's wrong, even if there really is a problem and you're creating a great solution. Why is it that marketing always has to speak to the person feeling a lack? And that's when it makes me want to tear everything down. And I'm like, time to set it all on fire. But what does one do? You know, it's like you still have to make a living. So it does certainly help to realize that this is just the state of how everything is functioning. And if we can start to, I guess, take these small steps to be more aware and in integrity in tiny ways, it'll start to ripple outward. Is that kind of the plan?
Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because I will often say to people that we have this, like many of us have this, what we call in therapy, a coupled belief, which means like they go hand in hand. Like they're so connected that there's not even like a beat in between. And what I'm talking about in this example is I've done something bad. So like you said, I'm acting selfishly, right? Let's use it as the example. I've done something bad means I am bad. And they're a coupled idea. Right. And so what happens when ideas are so coupled is it's really hard to get to the root of it or examine the like selfish behavior in this example, because in order to examine my selfish behavior, I have to look at the feeling that I have of I am bad. And most of us don't want to look at that. We will turn away from that because it's too hard. And so that's where defensiveness comes in. That's where the shutdown comes in. That's where the like, it's not me, it's you're the problem comes in, because we're defending against having to look at the selfishness because it's coupled with, that means I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, again, going back to this larger idea we're talking about, to slowly start to take those two ideas apart is really like the crux of the work. I can have acted selfishly, or I can have acted manipulatively in this dynamic. And it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or I'm selfish or I am manipulative. It means that it's a defense mechanism or strategy that I've learned to get a need met. And if I know that, now I can unlearn it, or I can address it, and I can learn a different way to meet my needs, right? But most people don't even get there because they're too stuck in that like coupled belief.
So since we're going so kind of like into the weeds right away, since this is a topic that we love so much, I'd love to take it a step back even and kind of talk about what codependency looks like in a really tangible day-to-day way in, let's say, romantic relationship, because maybe that's where most of us can spot it first.
Yeah. So I've been doing codependency recovery groups since like 2020, and I do like a 101 class regularly. And I do this thing where I call it like my laundry list of codependent tendencies. And it's always growing, right? But ultimately what I'll say to people is, you might notice some of these tangible kind of behaviors. Let's say in my relationship with my husband, I struggle with like 2, 10, and 14. In my relationship with my mom, it's like 1, 3, and 6. With my kid, it's like 9 and 10. So you're not going to check every box, but often it'll show up differently in different relationships because you're activated in different ways by that person, right? And it's going to bring certain things out in you. Ultimately, what I see happen so often in romantic relationships is that because both men and women, I believe, in this society have a choose me wound.
Yes.
Which I talk about a lot in the book. For women in particular, it's if I'm not chosen, I am nothing. If I am not partnered, right, I am nothing. And so we spend our life molding ourselves, shaping ourselves. What do I need to do to get chosen by this person, right? Because that's going to give me worth in this society.
Why? Because it's a societal value that a woman is not worthy on her own.
A value on her own.
Okay.
Right. And it's similar-ish for men. It just shows up differently. So, the choose me wound for men is really like my sexual prowess, like how much of a provider I am, how successful I am. Do I have like the attractive woman on the arm? Do I have like the 2 kids and the home? It's fascinating. It's kind of a little bit of a bird walk. There was a study that just came out, which I think is so interesting. And they polled, I can't remember how many, couple hundred of people that are considered Gen Z, that voted for Kamala Harris and voted for Trump, right? And they asked them, men and women, they separated them out. What are your values? Like what means, I think it was like a successful life. And the men on the more conservative side, their number one was having children. And on the women, both conservative and liberal side, children was like 5 to 10, like bottom. And so I think that points to what I'm saying, which is like men have been taught, here's your checklist of what it looks like to be a successful man in this life, right? And so you have to do what you have to do to make that happen. Otherwise, you don't have value. And we have our own version of that, which is like, I got to lock down the relationship. That's what's going to make me have
I have
value.
to stay partnered at all costs. I have to hold on to this relationship at all costs, even if it's expired. I know that's something that you've talked about on other folks' podcasts as well. That was a really interesting thing for me. I didn't realize that codependency itself could be something that, I guess it's kind of obvious, but could be something that makes someone, a woman especially, stay in a relationship that has been expired because otherwise there would be immense shame on her.
That's right.
And the shame part, I think, is so important. I think that is this underlying feeling that all of us who are struggling with codependency, whether it's struggling with codependency with substance, right, or shopping, like we said earlier, all of these things become ways in which to avoid our own shame. So I wonder how much of the antidote, which would then lead us to becoming the woman who could stand up one day in a relationship and say, hey, this actually isn't fair for either of us. I think we need to separate.
Sure.
I guess the antidote to that is starting to walk with and be comfortable with our own shame and maybe witness it enough until it transmutes and we realize that that's not the nature of who we are. But that's such hard work. Shame is something that I realize I'm actively working to avoid every second of my day.
Sure. And I think that when you look, to go back to what you were asking me, which is like tangible behaviors in relationships, I think what we can start to do is kind of pick one at a time and go through the ways that we show up in our relationships that are specifically trying to hide our shame from us. Like, we're not wanting to feel the shame. And so we people please. And so we don't speak up. And so we, right, like insert any of these behaviors in relationships here. Ultimately, I always say that shame and the fear of abandonment are the two through lines in everybody who struggles with codependency. So we've got to be able to address those two existential fears, right? Which are playing on, like, they are our most existential fears. We are social creatures, right? So if I was ostracized, that inevitably meant death, right? And if I suffered shame and that meant I was othered from the community, I could ultimately die as well. So you've got these two existential fears that are, I think, very strategically actually being used against us.
In what way?
To keep us in these structures of dominance, these societal dominance. So again, look at codependency, like what you were saying with marketing.
Yeah.
The shame and the abandonment wound, the existential human fears, are being used against us to maintain this system. Buy more. I'm gonna put my finger in your shame so that you buy something. Right? And so, again, it's like with mothers, for example. You're not doing enough. You're not doing it right. Something's wrong with you, right? If I keep you in that state of shame, you'll keep your mouth shut. You'll keep going along to get along. You won't challenge the systems. You won't look around and say, this is bullshit. I'm not doing this anymore. You won't stand up and say, I actually don't want to have children, and I'm okay with that, which more and more women are starting to do. You're just going to do it because you think you have to. So shame and abandonment that's it. Those are the two things, to your point, that we've got to continue forever. To go inward, to hold ourselves with compassion and grace, not to beat ourselves up that when I'm in shame, I act out in this way, but to follow the thread back and say, oh, I get it. It's shame related. What do I do with that?
Wow. You're really blowing my mind right now. I'm having this thought where I always like to know the why. I think the more we can understand the why of something, the more we are empowered to be consciously aware of it in each moment and perhaps take tiny steps to change it.
Totally.
And so what's coming up for me is, why are some people, especially women, more susceptible to the practice of codependency in relationship or in the world based on that shame and abandonment wound? And I guess the two avenues that I'm starting to connect it to in my mind are, one, could it be maybe those of us that come from cultures where religious shame was more prevalent?
Sure.
And then two, could it be those of us who have a deeper attachment wound from our caregiver?
So Okay, let me unpack kind of both of these a little bit.
I'm like,
'Cause
religion.
These are big. You're like,
Take
religion
it.
and attachment. Okay, got it. Let me see what I can do. So I think the religion piece, what I will say about that as somebody, as a therapist who has worked with a lot of people with religious trauma, right? I'm going to try to say this in a way that's not too inflammatory, but to separate out one's spiritual connection versus religious dogma is really important because, again, this idea of how did we get here? When you look at Western religion and the way that so much of the religion that we know has been constructed by man.
Yes.
Right? That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, that's hard for people to separate those two things out. I'll give you an example. In the book, so every chapter in the book, I again, my background's in depth, so I do a lot with myth and archetype and story. I have a section at the end of every chapter that I call Myths as Maps. And in one of the chapters around codependency and the choose me wound, I use the archetypal feminine figure of Mother Mary. Mm-hmm. And the chapter, kind of the thing that I'm talking about, is around perfectionism, what it looks like to be a woman, how we've essentially taken this archetype of a woman that was constructed. Mm-hmm. It's not actually based in the reality, the history of who this real woman was. It was very carefully constructed over centuries. Also, she is a construct essentially of multiple mythical figures. Right? And then they've taken all these mythical figures and then they've put things like piety and purity and, all of these like be demure, be self-sacrificing, the martyr, all of this stuff. And they've said, here you go. Here's your blueprint of being a good and acceptable woman. Good luck, by the way, trying to ever reach this very unattainable blueprint of being a woman. But that is how we keep half the population constantly striving and constantly feeling like they're not enough, right? So religion is like here, it's like the umbrella, but it's the ways in which it's been used by humans to control.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, I say that carefully because I know a lot of people I get it.
No, and I think religion is also important. Having something to believe in is a wonderful thing. Like, we see the benefit of that. Right. Spirituality connection is so beautiful, but totally understood what you're saying, that it's the interpretation of that religion to enforce caging, barriers on women that they have to be a certain way or else they are not godly or whatever it is.
Right. That's right. Yes. And then they're not going to be chosen, right? Again, which leads into our fear of abandonment. So I think a lot of what you're seeing with the religious side is that, right? It's this like, I have to attain this very unattainable version of humanhood, womanhood. And if I don't, there's something wrong with me, right? And I think in a lot of ways, religion is used as that. And that's where I see some of the codependency playing out on the religious side. And then to go the other arm, what you were saying about attachment, what's interesting is yes, I'm a therapist. I work with attachment theory and attachment styles, and I love it, and it can be really helpful. But there's also a part of me that feels like we've gotten a little too obsessed in this culture with attachment.
And can you just give us a little background on what you mean by attachment? There might be people who aren't
sure.
familiar.
Yeah. So attachment theory, right, essentially says that the way that we go out as adults and essentially relate to other human beings is directly related to our earliest attachments to our primary caregivers, right? So there's multiple attachment styles. It is a spectrum, which is another thing I can't stand about this very like Western black or white, all or nothing, is like, I'm an avoidant. I'm an anxious. It's like, no, you're not. You happen to be acting anxiously in this dynamic, but that doesn't mean you are anxiously attached. It's a spectrum. And you will flow in and out of different ways of attaching depending on the person that you're in relationship with.
Because it's all just kind of a reflection of dysfunctional attachment, period. So the way in which that dysfunction shows up, depending on power dynamics in each relationship or whatever that may be, can differ.
Activate something in you.
Yes, a different protective part. And maybe it's more protective for you in this relationship to be anxiously attached and fond, but perhaps in another relationship, like a friendship or a business relationship, it's more protective for you, or this part of you that's trying to keep you safe feels that it's more protective for you to be avoidant.
You got it. That's right.
So
like in my relationship with my husband, I tend to run more avoidant. My relationship with my best girlfriend, I tend to run more anxious. She's more avoidant than I am. So that just by nature pushes me a little bit more into the anxious realm, right? So I say that also because so many people are so like, I'm anxiously attached. And I'm like, No, you're not necessarily.
Yeah, that's maybe the pattern that you're most observing in
Right.
your dominant relationships,
Right.
but it doesn't mean that that's who you are or will always be.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And so I'd like to break that down first and foremost, right? The reason why I say I think we're a little obsessed, so two reasons. One, attachment theory, Bowlby and Ainsworth really came out with this theory. They started it in like the 60s, the 70s, somewhere in that general area when it was kind of being constructed. I would argue that since as human beings, we were never designed to live in a one, possibly two-person household with multiple children, I actually think it's really tricky to say, oh, well, this is what attachment theory is when it was only ever researched, our attachments, when we had a mother and or a father, right? Like one, maybe two primary caregivers. I don't think as human beings we were ever designed to only have one or two attachment figures. We were actually designed to have multiple attachment figures within more of a community structure, a collective structure, right? So for me, I always take it with kind of a grain of salt, right? Or a grain of sand, because I'm like, yeah, I get that. And also, is that something that's like wrong with you? Or is it like your mom should never have been your everything? That's too much responsibility to put on one or maybe two people. It should have been a village. It should have been 6 attachment figures, right? Because I have found that a lot of early attachment theory really blames the mom.
Yeah, I actually want to give people context to understand this because it's so important. So essentially this attachment theory is, originally it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, originally it was that depending on how secure your mother in this original paradigm, your primary caregiver, which defaulted to the mother and still does, depending on how secure they made you feel in the consistency of their attention and soothing, determined how that baby that they were studying would behave when the mother would leave the room and no longer be available to soothe externally. And if the baby kind of like got upset for a second, but then was kind of fine and moseying around the room, and when the mom came back in, that the baby was like, oh, great, she's here, happy, that was considered a secure attachment. But there were certain babies that they found did not self-soothe, did not respond to other folks in the room.
Right? Or the opposite. They like wouldn't
Shut
care
down.
and would shut down and would not look at her when she came back in the room, right?
Yeah. So that was where these other like dysfunctional attachment styles came from, like anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, disorganized attachment, and the opposite being like the perfection of secure attachment, right?
Which, like, what mother, realistically, if
Yeah.
it's one person,
Yeah.
and it's not supposed to be one person, right? I don't know a single woman, let's just use moms, because of course dads can be the primary attachment figure too. I don't know a single woman who's going to check that box every damn time and create 100% secure attachment in their child.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be the only caregiver, right?
And if that's the case, does that then maybe become unhealthy for that child to expect that one person is going to meet their needs at all times, and
So
then
you're
when
touching
they're
on it.
in relationship
You're touching
as
on
an
it.
adult? Because this is the other part of what I want to give context to, is that the attachment styles didn't so much matter for the child in infancy, but they were more so using that as a way to display why each of us have different presentations of relational issues as adults, where if when our partner's not answering our text right away, we're getting super anxious and texting them a million times, that's our anxious attachment from our caregiver. Or if we're being avoidant when our partner wants to have a conversation and avoiding healthy confrontation, that's the avoidant attachment style coming out. So it was a way to attribute these ways of not showing up in healthy ways in adult romantic partnerships. It was a way to attribute that to wounding or attachment style from childhood.
Right.
But it was all conditioned on the mom being this perfect beacon of secure attachment. And if not, you're kind of doomed in your adult relationships. And because I had studied psychology in my undergrad, and as I continued to kind of just observe myself and all those around me, I was like, I can't necessarily find a securely attached person. We all got problems, okay? So then that means that mothers...
Sometimes we all hit secure, right?
Yeah, and that mothers aren't perfect. And then further to your point, if this is based on the paradigm that the mother is supposed to meet that exact secure need, then that child will grow up and actually like be maybe more of a codependent than ever, because
you're circling it. I'm watching your mind go, oh shit, I'm getting it. So here's what I talk about that like really offends people. So there's two things. So one, yes, number one, no mom is ever gonna hit all of those boxes, all those milestones, right? So inevitably, you're going to end up with some form of attachment, air quote, trauma, right? But here's where I say that we're a little bit attachment obsessed. I find that we then go out into our romantic relationships and we then expect that partner to be that omnipresent great mother, that will then heal our attachment wound.
Did you read Project Eden or Return?
I know of Project Eden.
Okay.
I haven't actually read it.
Because it sounds so much like what they're, yeah.
Yeah, it's this idea, and I see this happen in every dynamic that I work with. And listen, I've addressed it in my own relationship too, which is like, we have got to stop parentifying our this person, this romantic person, and expect them to heal our attachment wound. It is not their job. And in and of itself, that you're putting that on them, that is codependency. You, external being, need to act a different way, show up differently than who you are, be a certain way for me so I can feel better, so that I can become more securely attached. Absolutely not. Reaching secure attachment, and I use air quotes because, again, it's a spectrum. We don't all live there all the time, is an inside job. It's not actually about the other person. Sure, people in their own way are going to contribute to your activation. If you're in a very unhealthy, very toxic, very abusive relationship, it's going to activate certain wounding. But even in that, even in the most toxic relationship, people will come to me and it's like, well, if they would just X, Y, Z, then I will feel X, Y, Z.
All relationship is just a call to go so deep in there and
it's
be like,
take your power back. You are essentially saying to somebody else, here's my ability to be enough. You handle it for me. No. And the more we do that, we're going to swim further and further away from actual secure attachment.
And that's where you can tie it into capitalism.
That's right.
Here's my ability to be enough. This next order from Revolve will heal it for me.
You got it.
This is going to be the one.
I feel uncomfortable.
Thing that fixes me.
I feel anxious. I feel not enough. I feel ugly. I feel unworthy. So let me either outsource it to a human, outsource it to a new dress, outsource it to the shiny car, gambling, drugs, whatever it is. It's all the same.
I think you should make a t-shirt that says secure attachment is an inside job. I think that's a bar.
TM, trademark.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that entering adult relationships in the West, where it's this fairy tale romantic, this person is our everything, they complete me, which ties into the whole we can't not be partnered because there must be something deeply flawed with us if a relationship doesn't work out, et cetera, et cetera. We do subscribe to this expectation of our partner that they do need to be our everything and meet our every need and be that person who can understand this part of us and that part of us, instead of kind of casting a wider net with our relationships and having many, I'm not saying a bazillion, but like having several varied, deep relationships and wide relationships instead of that one relationship that we so often silo and say, well, this person's here now, time for me to just kind of like focus entirely on them. And that's sort of the definition of addiction, is a narrowing of what brings you pleasure and a narrowing of your connection to this one thing.
And putting all of those eggs in that external basket, right? This is the thing that brings me calm, that brings me peace, that brings me a sense of self, that brings me that is addiction.
Wow. I mean, but yet on social media, it's like it is the thing to put your partner on the feed and say, this is my everything. This person is my, and like we, in every single way, we glorify that. We are rewarded for that. We look up to other people for that. We want to attain it. It seems to be like the goal is to have that person that completes you. And that's why I brought up that book. I think it's either Project Eden or Return to Eden.
I think it is Project Eden. That's ringing a bell, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you're such like a Jungian psychologist, everything that you're saying it, because that's a book based on Jungian psychology, where it talks about how when we are young, this attachment that we have to our primary caregiver, that person is seen as like our primal other to our child selves, because we don't yet understand that we are like our own being.
Ego structure yet. Yep,
yeah,
right.
So that's our primal other.
Yep.
And then when that primal other inevitably does not meet our needs to be our everything, to always regulate us, to always soothe us, to always make it okay for us in this world, because they can't, because they're a human. Then we start this search, the book says, for our magical other. And our magical other is that romantic partner that we then assign the impossible task of being our home. And we start to constantly look for our home outside of ourselves instead of really learning how to create that home inside of ourselves. And sometimes I dislike this conversation because it can sound like we're furthering more of that individualistic direction that our society is going in and being like, it's an inside job. It's got to be done all in here. But I think that ultimately yes, we do have to course correct right now because we're all kind of so disorganized.
That's right.
And we're all so reaching for being okay outside of ourselves that there does need to be a societal minute of like, actually, we do need to individually start to be okay in ourselves, because that's going to be what allows us to be a more collectivist connected culture in a healthy way.
That part right there. And that's the part that people skip over, because myself and then my best friend, Danae, you know, we have our podcast. We talk about this a lot. We've both gotten so much of that exact pushback. You're advocating for this. You're saying, you know, and it's like, no, but actually what we're talking about is, in order to be in a healthy collective culture, we want everybody to be individuated in order to be able to relate from an individuated way. Otherwise, it just becomes groupthink. This is where you see groupthink, because I don't have my own sense of self. I'm so worried that I will be ostracized that I'm going to go along to get along. And then you've got cultures and people doing things that actually is really out of alignment with what and who they really are, but they're doing it in this groupthink mentality. So I agree with you. And another thing that I get a lot of pushback on, and Danae and I have had this conversation too, is like, I actually think right now, especially to your point, the pendulum is swinging a little bit, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
That is what pendulum theory is, right? In order to find that next middle, which, you know, pendulum theory says it's never really middle. It's always a little bit further into evolution, is we've got to swing the pendulum. We've been over here for far too long. And what that is women couldn't have a bank account until 1978 in the United States.
How many times have I said that sentence?
Right? So like, we literally could not survive without a relationship. That wasn't that long ago, right? My husband was born in 1976. Okay. So in his lifetime, his mother could not have her own bank account. Okay. So I am sorry to say that I do actually think that women need to swing the pendulum a little bit. And that's, I think, what you're seeing happen right now. Now, listen, is it being done in the most healthy way? No. I see a lot of this like, fuck men.
I don't like
men,
the man hating.
Like the man bashing. Like I'm seeing that and I'm observing it objectively and saying, while I don't think that that's necessarily healthy or the way to go, I can see why and where it's coming from. Right. But I think that that is an indication of this pendulum swing, right? And so what's funny is that we've jokingly said before, like Danae and I will joke and say we're both a little bit more avoidantly attached, and the avoidants usually get the bad rap. Like we're the problem. The avoidants are usually the problem. And I'm like, well, of course, in a codependent society, the person who says, no, I value my sovereignty and I don't want somebody to kind of like encroach on that, we're the issue, because we are terrified of merging. Now, listen, it's not necessarily healthy, but we're terrified of being taken over and of being merged with like that, right? And so we're looked at as like the bad guys so often out there in the world of attachment. And a lot of times I'm like, I don't actually agree with that at all.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm glad that you brought up the bank account thing. Because when I first was like, oh my God, I think I'm a codependent. And I think it's like in every single area of my life. And I don't think that codependency is just about relationships. Like there's something really wrong here. I started to, you know, it's like you start at phase 1 and then you realize, oh no, there's a phase 2. Oh no, there's a phase 3. Yeah, exactly. So my phase 1 was like, well, it's because my mom is a codependent, or because I like watched a codependent relationship growing up. And then I looked at her mom, and I started to learn about my lineage as a woman. And I learned that my great-grandmother, her husband died, I think, during, I want to say, the Spanish flu pandemic, something like that. And she lost everything because she couldn't have a bank account, so she had to sleep with a gun under her pillow and had to protect her children in a fight or flight kind of way, and like never got remarried, never had anyone else to protect her, and had to go through the world literally with a gun in her hand for the rest of her life with no money, nothing. And then my grandmother was in an arranged marriage because she did not want to marry a man. So they said, guess what? We're going to give you one. And you're going to have to do this. And then that pain that I'm sure she had to endure of being in a relationship that she did not want or choose and was not serving her led her to, unfortunately, not have the best relationship with her kids, especially her daughter, because her daughter was a reflection of
all of her pain and suffering and the lineage that will continue.
Exactly. And which then led her to, you know, treat my mother the way that she did, and then led my mother, again, it's like this generational cycle. And I was like, oh my God, this didn't start with me. And it also didn't start with like something being wrong with the women and them being codependent.
No.
It started with a societal imbalance in every type of way that constantly put women in a position of having no power. And now we are the first generation of women who from birth had access to a bank account are now becoming entrepreneurs at a fantastical rate. Like, it's really amazing what's happening right now, but you're right. I think that there is such a swing where there's also an anger as well now that we're experiencing this, and we're still feeling those attitudes from society even as we're experiencing this.
Right. And also like men are suffering right now, right? There is this loneliness epidemic. There is all, highest rates of suicide, all of these things. And that's very valid and very real. And so as women have been doing our work and society has been slowly changing, right? They've also been feeling the impacts of that. Yeah. And so I feel for our brothers, they're struggling too, right? I mean, who am I if I'm not the provider? Where do I source my value if I'm not your survival, right? Like they're struggling to find their sense of connecting to their emotional being, their spiritual being, right? Because that's all been cut off.
Wow.
As well. But I don't think right now it's us. I think what we've been doing for a long time is trying to like drag men along by the ear. And what I see happening more and more with women is like, I'm not doing that anymore.
We're just going to be the change.
I'm going to do it for myself and for my children. And you're either going to do the work or not.
Yeah, right? You're either going to like meet me in this paradigm of like, here's what I'll accept in a way, or I'm just not going to play
There's less partnering. People are having less children, right? And even to go back to your lineage and your family of women, oftentimes I will say to clients, I'm like, here's something really hard to hear, but I have found for me that it can be freeing. If I look at the lineage of women in my history, I know there's a couple of them that if they really had agency, wouldn't have had children.
Dude, I'm here by accident.
Right? Wouldn't have had children.
100%.
And so if we gave women that choice and that option, we wouldn't have so much hurt and we wouldn't have so much of this lineage of pain because they didn't have a choice. They didn't have birth control. They didn't have agency over who they married. They didn't, right? They couldn't survive. And so, it's like, I hate to say to people, your mom might not have had you, but I think it's important for us to humanize the women in our lives and realize that, recently, right before I moved to Costa Rica, my husband and I had a go-around, a pretty big fight. And my best friend and him went out for coffee. And she brought that up to him. She was like, I think something that I want you to think about and maybe think about every day is that, again, your mother could not have a bank account until 1978. And she said, I think it's really important that in these heteronormative dynamics, we need to remember she doesn't need you. And she said it's not like, oh, women don't need men. It's not that. She's like, she's here because she wants to be, not because she has to be. And if you know that someone's here because they're choosing it, it's by choice, you're going to act differently in your relationship.
Totally.
You're going to show up differently. She's not here because she has to be, because she needs you for survival. Think about that every day in your relationship. It is a choice nowadays, right? And that goes for both sides.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really should impact the way you show up when you're like, this person tomorrow could decide that they don't want to be here. And I think that will all make us grow up a little bit and act differently in our romantic relationships. It's not your parent. They don't have to be there. It's not their responsibility to raise you.
Yeah. I mean, my brain kind of goes to like red alert of that individualistic thing as we talk about this, but in a good way, because there is something about the pendulum swinging all the way to individualistic, which we know is not healthy as a society and we know is not our true nature. It's like the antithesis of our true nature. But there is something about that swing that has actually allowed us, even in family relationships, to be like, actually, we are in a place where all of us technically have so much convenience at our hands, have so much autonomy, ability to do X, Y, Z, that technically we don't need anyone.
Right.
It's a scary robot Wall-E world, right? Like,
that's right.
We technically don't, / we do, obviously. And once it gets so far to that point where we realize that we don't and that we just really want each other and like need each other in a soul, heart, like human way, I think that we will start to show up in relationship differently.
But
we're getting to like such a far end where it's like, oh, actually, I have AI too. I actually don't need anyone. And I think that that's sort of the medicine maybe of like the coming of AI, which is where people are going to realize, okay, and I have this all at my fingertips and I still feel so empty. And I actually need to like show up for my village and my community now.
In a different way.
In a different way.
And in a way that doesn't say, you need to be different in order for me to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if I'm saying to you, if I need you to be anything other than who you are for me to be okay in my skin, that's transactional. That's not based in real love. So we need to start also seeing, and again, this goes for our children, this goes for our romantic, our friends. Like we need to start seeing the way that we're actually looking at people and saying, you need to show up differently for me to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, I say a lot too, this idea of like, we look at in this society, length of a relationship, longevity of a relationship somehow means success.
Yeah.
And I think that's another big myth that we've got to start breaking down, right? Like if, you know, I have somebody who says to me, oh, I'm going to my grandparents' 60th anniversary party this weekend, and I know your grandparents hate each other's guts and have barely spoken a word to each other in 20 years. I'm not going to celebrate that. Right? But if my girlfriend, my best friend I keep talking about, when her and her husband decided to lovingly separate, and they're best friends, they're the best co-parents. I look at them as like a beacon. Of course, they're not perfect, but I look at them as like the beacon of this is the way we can do it. That's the kind of relating I want to see more people actually engaging and celebrating, right? It's like, we did this thing, we got married, we brought a beautiful child into this world. We're not going to wait until we hate each other's guts before we leave it. We're going to say, this isn't working for us anymore. We have to change the way this structure is so that we can continue loving each other.
So we can continue a relationship that's maybe not the container of a marriage.
That's right.
Because that was actually not serving us, needing the other person to be the husband or the wife that we needed.
We weren't loving each other.
Yeah. It's changing. It doesn't actually delete the relationship. It changes the container of the relationship to one where both parties can be who they really are.
That's right.
And each has maybe enough distance in that dynamic to actually honor and love and respect who the other person is.
That's
maybe they can't do that when they're that close in a marriage.
Exactly. When there's that many of like societal expectations and like, you have to be this for me and you're supposed to do that for me. This is what I demand of you because you're my husband and I own you. Because you're my partner, you need to do this for me. What? Who said? Who told you that? Right? Who tells us that it's their responsibility to check these boxes? Somebody told us that. Like, that came from somewhere, you know? But once that container changed, that person wasn't responsible for that anymore. And they both had to essentially go within
and start to meet those needs themselves, which might have been the most healing thing they could have done for each other. And the most beautiful gift they could have given each other is to say, actually, I won't be able to meet these needs. I was trying, but these are actually your needs. And you're meeting some needs for me that are mine to own.
That's right.
And actually, like, this is going to be so good for us to have to see that we can do it. And we can. Okay, wait. I have some questions about how to, can you heal? LOL. Can you change the way in which you are showing up as a codependent in a relationship while you are still in that relationship is one of my questions, but I want to like table it for a second. Yeah. And I also want to ask if both parties cannot, like, how do you know when it's time to leave a relationship? But before I ask those questions, I just want to put a pin in what you just said and say that I see it more than ever, like being a social media person. Well, right now, a very rebellious social media person who refuses to post because I am having a lot of trouble engaging in.
Same.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Same.
It's actually like the healthiest thing I could possibly do is to not engage in that, and yet I'm like sabotaging my whole life.
Me too.
But at least you'll see me here on the pod. But I do notice, like, for example, in the social media world, right? Again, it's like relationship is like one of the big things that people follow another person for. Oh, she has the perfect marriage. She has the perfect relationship, yada, yada. We notice that when people post their wedding pictures, their
most engagement.
Exactly. It's the most engagement ever. Oh, the ring, the this, the that, right? And people really like ride for these couples. And that shows, right, how we honor, celebrate longevity of a relationship as a value versus integrity of a relationship as a value. And so I see there's this one woman that I recently met who's lovely, and she and her husband were a very public Instagram couple and recently separated and are about to finish their divorce, and yet they still work together. They still have an amazing company. They co-parent, all the things. But the hatred
Oh, yeah.
that I see her receive in her comments from women.
Always. Yep.
I mean, and men. There's some men in there.
Sure, but
there's some men.
The women are usually the ones with the biggest pitchforks.
Why? Because we're so afraid and have to uphold. Why?
Yeah, I think it's that. And I mean, so there's part of my book where I break down what I call the Trinity wound. So the witch wound, the sister wound, and the mother wound. And I think what I see happen so often is that, well, a lot of what you're talking about is, if I'm looking at you doing this thing out of integrity and you are thriving and you are happy and you are showing this, what it makes me do is look at my own life. And it makes me see the ways in which I'm actually not living in integrity and I'm actually miserable in the structure that I haven't questioned, that I've just gone along to get along, that I've gone for the blueprint, right? And so when people, especially women, step out of line and do things differently and thrive, a lot of times it makes others, especially women, look at the ways that they're not. And it's shadow work, right? It activates it in me. And I don't want to look at it, so I got to put it somewhere. And so I'm going to put it out on you. You activated this feeling in me, but I don't have the strength to actually sit with that reality and that feeling, because it would mean that I have to really examine my shit. So I'm just going to put it on you, right? So I see that happen a lot, especially in social media, obviously. But the way that I talk about, these wounds, it's this like internalized patriarchy, this internalized misogyny that women carry, where I'll often say that women are some of the biggest upholders of patriarchy that there are. Because again, it's like, if you're doing it differently, what it does is show me that I think this happens a lot with our mother's generation. It's like, or our grandmother's generation, like they didn't have the choice.
Yeah.
Right. And so I see this happen a lot, where there's like a lot of generational jealousy,
judgment,
jealousy. You're an idiot. Don't do that. What are you thinking? Because we see in our daughters all the things that we never had the ability to do, or didn't have a choice, right? Or maybe didn't have the courage. Who knows? Maybe if you had the option, you just didn't have the courage for whatever reason.
Didn't have the self-relationship, the self-worth,
all the things, right?
It's like horrible.
It's horrible, yeah. And so what do I do? Again, it's too hard for me to sit with that. And so I externalize it and say, how dare you? Get back in line.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to do this.
That's
this
how it feels
works.
when I read those comments, that it just bothered me so much. I had studied these comments one night and was like, there's so much of the get back in line. Don't do this to your family. Like it's the onus is on her to keep this family for her daughter who they don't even know. It was a very interesting, get back in the rules. But then those women are suffering so much from those rules in their own lives. And so I guess there's no solution here, but in the moment, but I guess the action step for those of us who are ready to maybe be a little more radical and change making around this and want a different future is to perhaps stand in that truth and that action and just publicly own it.
Yeah. I think that's part of it for sure. Obviously not everybody has to publicly own it. It would be a little difficult for most, but, I talk a lot about how kids learn by what they see, not by what they hear. So this idea of teaching our daughters what it looks like to have a healthy relationship with self and with other, right? What does that look like? Because you said that this woman has a daughter. If she stayed in a relationship that was soul crushing, right? Not to say that it was even bad. Not to say that he was a bad person.
He's a good guy.
Same thing as my friends.
Guy. Right. Yeah, and that's fine.
Same thing as my friends. They were like, "You're amazing. I love you as a friend.
Totally.
We're just not meant to be in this container anymore. It's suffocating both of us, right? Fine." But if I choose to stay in that relationship, and by the way, I say choose to stay, but also we need to be very clear that you and I are sitting here saying, oh, our generation has the choice. Not everybody does it.
Especially financially.
Or not everybody does, right?
Yeah.
Financially, that to me is the biggest and last domino in this kind of control of patriarchy is the financial control.
Yeah.
Many women still do not have the option to leave, even if they are in a horribly devastating relationship, right? So I think I want to say that big and bold, and I get it, and I understand it, and I'm not minimizing it. But even if you are still in that, what happens is I look at that person, and again, she activates in me my feeling of not having control over my life, right? Not having that agency, the desires that I have to maybe change the relationship that I'm in, but I can't, right? And so I get angry. And again, I project it onto this person. And so to go back again to this idea of children, that woman does have a choice, and that's lovely, right? So because she has the choice, what is she teaching her daughter? She's teaching her daughter what love potentially looks like, which is, I love this person, in this instance, the father, right? I love your father as an individual, as a soul, so much that I'm going to allow this container to change, and I'm going to suffer in the process, of course, right? It's going to be sad and hard, because I know that we're better together when we're not in this container. We can be better friends. We can be better individuals. We can be better parents. So what am I actually teaching my daughter? That's the kind of love I want for my daughter. I want her to see that. I don't want her to see me martyring myself. I don't want her to see me gritting my teeth and suffering because I think I have to, right? Because then that's what I'm teaching her to go out and do. Our children are only going to live as full of a life as we allow ourselves to live. So if I'm capping it and I'm saying I can't be any happier than this because society says I can, or I believe that I can, then that's what she's going to do. And so I think that it's actually really unfair for people to say, what are you teaching your daughter? I know what I'm teaching my daughter.
Yeah.
I'm teaching her to have a healthy relationship.
And if it took any of us that much work to get to that knowing.
And do it overnight.
Yeah, it's like, I guess we just have to accept that a lot of people aren't going to understand it because it took us so much pain and self-examination to get there that it's like we're just going to have to be misunderstood.
And privilege, like we were talking about.
Literally privilege, yeah. In so many ways. Okay, that is, I guess it's like there's just going to be some, like any kind of wave of change that has to come through a society in order to further progression. There's going to be the people that kind of like go first each time and are not having a great time because of it.
We always say, like, the hard part about being a way shower is there's no one that's done it before you.
Yeah.
So you don't have anybody to look to say, oh, that's how they did it. Let me do it that way, or let me change it. You're right. We are kind of the first generation.
Yeah.
To do this. And so it is going to be hard because we don't really have blueprints to follow.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so about codependency relationship, I want to finish it off with those two questions. The first one being, if you recognize that you, like all of us, are engaging in codependent tendencies and behaviors inside of your romantic relationship, but it's not a toxic relationship. It's, it's not an abusive relationship. It's just one where you're realizing that you guys are being pretty codependent on each other. Is it possible to make strides and become healthier while still in the container of the relationship?
So I'm going to say yes and.
Okay.
So yes, it is possible. I'm actually living proof of it. I've been doing my work around codependency more intensely in my almost 8-year relationship now than ever before. For me, I've had to learn it through the relationship. That's been the learning, right? Like that's been the kind of test. But the reason why I say and is because you're only 50% of a relationship. So if you're the only one doing the work, then the probability of it actually evolving and getting healthier and you two both individuating is slim, right? Like both people have to do the work, but they both have to want to do the work for themselves, not for each other. They have to actually intrinsically be motivated to do that kind of healing work, right? And so I do think it's possible. I don't think you have to be alone to do the work. I think some people do the work better alone. I do.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there like a subset of people where being
Yeah.
alone is actually the most helpful thing? Because
I do think so.
You learn that self-relationship. You learn, I can rely on myself. I'm having so much pain in this moment and I can't go to this person and they can't be a crutch to me, but I found that I have myself.
Yes.
And only through that rock bottom moment did I feel that I have myself.
And I think everybody's going to have their version of what healing looks like. And so that's why I say yes and, because it's like it is individual. I think each person is going to find either, to your point, I've got to be alone to do this work, or actually for me, the catalyst for my work has been the relationship. My partner and I are very much in this mindset of like, again, it's like, I don't need you, I want you. And so what does that allow us to do relationally if we're coming from that place, right? And so could I have continued my codependency recovery on my own? Of course I could.
Yeah.
But my daughter and my partner have really been like the fire under my ass, honestly, in all this work. It's why I wrote the book, because having my daughter was actually the huge wake-up call for me, where I did what you did with your mom, which I was like, oh my God, I'm not passing this down. Holy shit. In her eyes, I see a lineage of this shit. And I'm not doing this anymore. And it was her that really gave me the like power to say, absolutely not. The buck stops here. And so I see that a lot. I see it a lot with mothers. You know? And I say that to women a lot. I'm like, listen, I get it. Self-agency. We've got to have that intrinsic motivation, like I just said. And also, when you first start this work, if your motivation for doing it is your kids, fine, so be it.
Yeah.
Love it. Use that as your motivation. At some point, it will start to become intrinsic, I promise.
Yes.
But if you need that to be the push, then let that be the push.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. Yeah, and I guess it's also just like how deep in it are you? I think there was just a point where I was like, I am so ill in a codependent way that I actually have to be alone, or I actually have to back away from certain friendships where it's like they're also that codependent that we can't do a different dance together. Like we just have to not be around each other. And there's a point where I was like, I'm actually not allowed to have a best friend right now. I've put myself on timeout because that was just where I was at. And I really, really needed for me, the medicine was being my own best friend and being my own person.
That's beautiful.
But then, as we said, it's not an individualistic culture that we're after. We do need each other. And ultimately, the work of this is to be able to be in healthy relationship. That's the ultimate goal, is to be able to have many beautiful, deep relationships, but where each person knows, I've got myself, so I don't need you to do that for me or to love me because I don't love me.
That's right. Yeah. And ask the motivation. Like, I love the question of motivation. Like, I talk in the book about this concept of like the difference between craving and desire. If it's coming from a place of craving, that craving is from a place of lack.
That's such a good self-check-in question.
I need you to fill something in me because I'm coming from a place of lack. Desire actually comes from a place of wholeness, right? So if you can question your motivation, like, why am I reaching out in this way to this person? Why am I trying to have sex with this person? Why am I trying to not rock the boat? Why? If it comes back to because it'll make me feel better or because I'm more comfortable if they're okay, so I'm going to try to fix their problems for them or save them, all these ways that we show up codependently, then you've got your answer, right? And so it comes back to motivation. Again, like, what is that coming from?
And is this like this really icky, uncomfortable feeling inside my body that I'm like trying to stop? And like it's body awareness, it's embodiment. It's like there's so many reasons why it's not safe to be in there. So, I mean, it's just it's a 7-hour podcast. Okay, and then the last question is how do you know that it is time to leave a relationship? Because you alluded to it before, and I've heard you say it on another show, where in our society, it's like we often wait until we hate the other person, and then we think that that's finally a good enough reason to leave. But like, what are some signs that it's an expired relationship?
Yeah. I mean, again, I know it's like a one-size-fits-all, but I'm actually going to rip off. My husband often says, he's got this kind of saying where he'll say, when the relationship is causing you to break up with yourself, that's when you know it's time to go, which I think is like a really beautifully simple way to put it, which is like, if I feel like no matter what I do, no matter how much work I put into this, myself or the relationship, I cannot show up authentically, that's usually an indication that this is just not a fit, right? And it doesn't have to mean anything about that person or you. Yeah. It can really just very simply mean we're not in alignment in that way. And can we allow it to just be that without it becoming a whole story of like victim, perpetrator, they're the bad guy, they're the, whatever that becomes. Can we allow it to just rest in, for whatever reason in this moment, we're not in alignment. And so I can't actually be my most authentic self no matter what I do. And so can I allow that relationship to dissolve in that way, at least in that way,
Wow. Thank you so much for this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, The Motherhood Myth?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, it was kind of, it was motivated by having my own daughter, especially having a daughter, I think, and realizing the lineage that was being passed down and just deciding I was going to draw a really clear line in the sand of I'm not going to continue this legacy. And so I started, as I am a research nerd, I started digging into like, how did we get here, And I wanted this book. I had a friend early on in my writing of the book say, write the book that you wish you had when you were like in it, right? And so that's really what I hope to do with this book. So it's broken into 3 sections: motherhood, sex, and relationships. So it's not just about mothers or for mothers. I've actually had a lot of men come to me and be like, I loved this book. It was so insightful, which I love to hear. But it really is a breakdown of the codependent society and also the dominator society models that we live in and how we got to be here and what can we do about it? How can we change it so that, to your point, as we're swinging this pendulum, we're coming into a place of more individuated, like self-assured. I can relate to you from a place of self-assuredness. I'm not going to lose myself. I don't need you to complete me, right? I can honor and respect you as a sovereign being because I feel that way about myself. So that was really my motivation.
That's such wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you.
We will put a link to that book in the show notes and a link to your socials. Vanessa, thank you so much for being on What's the Juice.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for listening. And I just want to share that we keep the show completely ad-free because I personally hate podcast ads and I think it takes away from the purity of a show and its mission. But I also understand that producing a podcast is extremely expensive. But we really care about making this information accessible to everybody in a community-based way. And I'm always trying to figure out how to continue to make this show sustainable since it is a really big cost. So if you ever want to support the podcast, if you enjoy these episodes, if they benefit your life and you want to give back and help us to continue, you can support my line of herbal supplements called Organic Olivia. As you guys know, I'm an herbalist. That's how I got into the wellness world and started this podcast. And I have a full line of incredible natural herbal supplements, everything from a cough syrup that's safe for entire families and kids, that's totally natural, all the way to a tincture that we just released called Perfectionist Drops that's Nervine specifically designed for very rigid type A people that have a lot of tension in their jaw, just like me. And we're just always developing new products and always finding new solutions in a creative herbal way to things that we deal with in this modern world. So as always, the link is in the show notes to purchase a formula or 2 for you and your friends on organicolivia.com. And I'm really grateful for your support and to have you here.